Welcome back to the morning show right here on Arise News. I'm Rufai City.
I'm Adeso Almoron.
And I'm Sheto Atigari.
Alrighty. Yeah, the Nigerian government is constantly looking for ways of diversifying the economy of the country. There's a conscious effort, and this is targeted towards economic growth, particularly in the context of the recently released Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ARGP, for 2017 to 2020.
The federal government's action also provides an analysis of key questions regarding the sustainability, achievability, and the prospect of the ERGP. Though a welcome development in the area of diversification, some economic critics believe that there's too much focus on taxation, which creates more economic hardship for the citizens.
However, following the harsh reality of global decline of crude oil prices and the growing multiple taxation on citizens, the reality of a viable economic growth is more than ever generating a public debate. Well, joining us now to talk about Nigeria's economy and multiple tax burden on businesses in Nigeria is Tope Fasua, a Nigerian businessman, economist, writer, and a 2019 presidential candidate for Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party, ANRP. Good morning, Mr. Fasua. Okay, so while we wait for Mr. Fasua to join us on this conversation, guys, recently the Ease of Doing Business Index, Nigeria moving in 15 spots.
Yes.
This has got a lot of commendation. Even the government is tapping itself on the back.
Yes.
In fact, I think it was just poetic justice, because I saw my piece that was written, that was published in this day newspaper today on Ease of Doing Business, letter to the editor, and I kept on looking at those thresholds. I mean, it's not about you doing well on the ranking. It's about things like, what is the composite PMI? What is productivity PMI? What is manufacturing rate like in this country? I mean, taxation rates, access, arbitration. We know how we've been going back and forth on P&ID for quite a while now.
Yeah.
Why do we still have to go do arbitration for contracts in the UK rather than Nigeria? But if you ask yourself honestly, fine, a very good job being done by PEBEC, by Mr. Chumake. But the truth is, when you look at it very deeply, can we still say boldly that we've been able to, tie all those loose ends? When you look at the fact that this Ease of Doing Business numbers were just numbers between Lagos and Kano.
Can I
Not
also
pervasive
quickly
across the
add
country.
before that this list actually came out before a lot of taxations were put into effect. So my fear now is, does this
reflect
on these
rankings?
numbers? But then we'll find out very soon.
Indeed. And Tope Fasua now joins us from our Abuja studios. Thank you so much, Mr. Fasua, for joining us at this time.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks
Great.
for
Well,
inviting me.
the last time you are a tax advocate, a tax economy-driven advocate indeed. Last time you were on this show, a conversation with us, you said, and I quote, at some point we need to stamp our feet on the ground and do something about generating liquidity within. And so since the last time you've been here, there's been the 2020 appropriation bill that is being debated now. When you look at that, the 2.2 VAT increase, apart from that, you have the digital tax, you have the proposed tax on carbonated drinks, and many others. I wonder if you're impressed.
Well, I'm a good governance advocate, not necessarily a tax advocate. I actually do believe that, yes, of course, government could do a lot better on taxes and generation of revenue here. I also believe very strongly that the budget should be a lot higher than it is. And, chances are that because of the kind of pressure we put on government, now we're talking of about 10 trillion, which is still subpar. If you ask me, we should be talking a minimum of 15 trillion if we are serious at all. If you look at the per capita of that budget, it's about $140 or thereabout per person per year, which is going to be spent on security, education, health, everything, the whole shebang, which is not good enough. Even with African standards, it's not good enough. I mean, of course, I've gone through some of that over time here. However, what the government is doing also is, of course, they're panicking. On one hand, they're panicking. On another hand, they tell you that it really doesn't matter, that we're not over-borrowed, they're doing so well, and so on and so forth, But when you are coming with a barrage of taxes and burden on the people without mitigating on the other end, when you're coming with that without showing example of how you're reducing the cost of governance, when it's still all about, traveling around the world and, getting all your appurtenances of office and all the perks and so on, then people are going to resist, So you're coming with communication tax, you're coming with an increase in VAT to 7.5. Not 7.2%. I believe, yes, we should do that. We should increase that VAT. By now, we can't just stay at 5% that we've been at for maybe 20, 30 years, since Abacha days and so on. We see, my problem is that, okay, fine, I believe that the people should also not get into that mode of saying, look, we're not going to cooperate at all. We don't want to chip in at all, even if government is what it is. Maybe sometime later, we may be lucky to have a government that actually very responsive to the people. We may be lucky to get a government that actually that understands the responsibility of showing leadership by example, by cutting down on the cost of governance. I mean, with all of this going on, we still have a Senate that's saying that, look, we need our 50 million cards. There's nothing anyone can do about it. And we're still having scenarios where between those who are in government, whether appointed or selected or elected, there's that battle for who gets what. So the way they think is just that, look, if I'm a senator, I'm a House of Reps member, and I'm here, by way of protocol, I'm ahead of the Director General or a minister, or we're at par. Therefore, I must get everything he gets. In 2015, one of the reasons I actually had cause to shift away from supporting just being maybe a government supporter and also setting up a party of our own was, from 2015, when the ministers were appointed 7 months into the government, the first thing we heard was they started complaining about they didn't have houses in Abuja. In fact, one of them said, I won't mention his name now, he said, look, I'm still living in my house in Abuja. I'm like, what, do you want to stay in my house? What's wrong with living in your house that you built with so many hundred millions, But they ensure they got either more benefits for another house or they got a different house and all of that. That's the way we run in Nigeria, and that's what's not good enough. But there are avenues that, let me just land on this. There are avenues for revenue generation in this country. I'm privy to the IMF report on our taxation and revenue in 2017 under Kemi Adeosun. Even things, I would actually emphasize, yes, the VAT, we can get that out of the way. If left to me, I'll take it to 10%. But things like capital gains taxes, we're not getting enough. Things like inheritance taxes, nobody even hears about it. All of these things are in the statute books. Excise duties on cigarettes, on alcohol, that one, they ran into a stone wall. We got a point where government is even afraid of talking about increasing revenues, but they are now panicking because the debts are overwhelming us. And, the budget is not even going anywhere in the first place.
You talked about various forms of taxation. The problem in Nigeria, when you look at the existence of collecting taxes, why we have a tax to GDP ratio of 6% as compared to the prevailing rate of about 15% in the sub-Saharan African region, is the fact that the efficiency of collecting this has always been a pariah. Take, for instance, we've got 55 taxes you have to pay as a business. How do you pay them? I can't have a one-size-fits-all app on my phone that pays all the taxes just at the tap of my phone. It's still cumbersome and treacherous paying taxes in this country. Why is that difficult? Why is that difficult? Why don't we solve that first before we increase taxes and overburden people with taxes? Tope.
Right, I think we've got to, at least part of my advocacy is that, look, we've got to a point where we all have to help ourselves, we have to also think beyond who is in government, all these things about, like they say, politicians think about the next election, leaders think in terms of the next generation, and also that part about, if you don't do stuff that you're not going to benefit in, then you haven't actually lived. You have to do stuff and sacrifices that you will not benefit in. And if you read some of Lee Kuan Yew, he believed that the biggest demographic in any country, the biggest voters are those children, unborn children of ours. And that in any decision the government must take, you must always vote. Somebody must vote for those children unborn, and they will always carry the day. Most of our decisions in this country now, we don't consider the unborn children. If you ask our unborn children, should you collect another $3 billion from World Bank and take our loans to about $86 billion as we speak and borrow some more from everywhere, our unborn children will say no. If you ask them, should we empty our reserves in oil? Should we just sell and spend today and all of that? They will say no. You understand what I'm saying? So, like someone also said, you know, we don't own those resources. We are holding those resources in trust for those children unborn. That's the way. So my thinking is, you know, that's systemic in terms of looking at all the pros and cons. So we've got all that problem that you mentioned, all those problems. But in spite of those problems, we must chip in and do the needful from our own end. You know, but I would say that there are taxes that are easier to administer. Those ones are there, like VAT. That's why the allure for VAT is there. The reason why that I'll support government on 7.5 is because, look, even countries that used to be tax-free, they've now introduced VAT. I was speaking to a few guys from FRS a couple of weeks back, and I actually informed them, look, Saudi Arabia introduced VAT 2018, January 1st. The UAE introduced it January 2017. These are Arab countries. These are tax-free countries before. So every country is realizing the fact that you have to generate the funds from within your system. Nigeria is not doing well enough. So that's
economic realities differ. You can't compare the economic reality of Saudi Arabia and the UAE with that of Nigeria. You have a country in Saudi Arabia where the citizens, they work, they don't work, they get close to $1,000 every month. Nigerians don't get that. So even if they bulk that up, that's not the case for an average Nigerian. Close to 100 million Nigerians can afford 3 square meals to live at less than $2 per day. So economic realities differ.
Well, okay, economic realities may differ, human beings don't differ. I personally, I'm a particularly proud person in that regard. I don't believe anybody is superior to me in this world. If the people of Nigeria should be able to live like the people of Saudi Arabia or the Americans or anybody else in the world, you know, that's my thinking. And look, well, the way we have conducted ourselves so far has been extremely appalling. You got all those children on the streets, you know, with nobody caring for them. You got all these old people, even pensioners dying on the queue. And that's not the way it should be. We got people working in this country and not able to make ends meet. We have graduates coming out of school and not having jobs to do because of that lack of imagination. Like Einstein said, you know, your intelligence can take you from point A to B, but imagination is what takes you everywhere. Imagination is what we're lacking. So yes, the conditions here may be different from Saudi and UAE and all of that, but the human beings I want to believe are the same, and we must continue to assert ourselves. But look at what's going on with us now. Africa is now treated as one country. A singular country will invite the whole of Africa. All the leaders will keep running there, especially in Black Africa. You will see that the world has lost respect for us as a people. However, we must also stand up for ourselves. So so the responsibility is back on us. How can we reorganize ourselves? How can we reorganize our finances? How can we, you know, budget for ourselves and think for ourselves and project for ourselves and have that vision for ourselves that will take us to the point where we will regain our respect?
Okay, Mr. Tope, I understand your concerns. I'm just going to ask this question. When you come back, you answer it. I want to find out what is being done regarding people that haven't paid their taxes. Now, we're looking at a higher number of taxes being introduced because the finance minister has said that the problem is diversifying our economy and getting a higher revenue generation. However, we have people that are above the middle class that are still avoiding tax. However, instead of those people being followed up, we have Nigerians, honest Nigerians, who are paying their taxes, now having to face more and more taxes on carbonated drinks, on calls, on SMS, on data. Every time we turn, there's a new tax. The people that have scaled through these taxes all these years, what's being done? Are there any penalties? Are they facing anything? How do we get these monies off of them? And we will answer this question when we come back from the break. Welcome back to Arise News. You're still watching the morning show, and we are joined by Tope Fasua, a Nigerian businessman, economist, writer, and 2019 presidential candidate for the Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party. Now, before the break, I was asking about the penalties that have to be put in place regarding people that we know are scaling these tax reforms. Why is it that honest Nigerians that are paying their taxes wake up every morning and there's a new tax around the corner? There's CST. They want to tax our carbonated drinks. They want to tax our data and our SMSs and our calls. However, we know people that are making loads of money and are not paying taxes. What's being done? What's being done to those people?
Okay, well, actually, I'm not the spokesman for FRS. You know, those guys, they sort themselves out. Although I know that they've really been harassing quite a number of people. Maybe some are politically protected. I don't know. But let me let you know that between the FRS and the NFIU and the EFCC, they have access to everybody's account as we speak. They have access to everybody's account. If they take your BVN, they see every exposure that you have. They see all your accounts everywhere it is. I interacted with a few of them, and they told me there was some guy who said he had 10 million naira turnover, only for them to use his BVN and find out that he had 10 billion sitting down somewhere. On which, so they have all the powers, unprecedented powers now with our FRS, the NFIU, the EFCC, and all those agencies to reach into anybody's account. Anybody that's listening to me should note that very carefully. You see, again, that's why I'm an advocate of telling our Nigerians that, look, if you're making good money in this country, pay your taxes. It doesn't kill. And in fact, it makes you feel very good. If you were making 100 million, 1 billion, what are you waiting for? How much can you really spend? You know, now, there's also the education we need to give our people to say, okay, at the end of the day, we need to move away from that antagonistic relationship with government where you feel that, look, they're trying to take my money. Did they make the money for me? I heard that people say that a lot of times. When you talk about property tax, people say, did the government build the house for me? Property taxes is one angle that we're not even talking about, even though it is chargeable by states and local governments and so on. People don't want to pay. You're living in GRA with so much, a lot going for you and all, and you receive those taxes. So those ones are there. Now, the government did do something called VAIDS. VAIDS, and with that, voluntary asset and income declaration scheme, and they also had a foreign aspect where if you had a property abroad, you can declare. Now, of course, I think they were politically stonewalled with the VFR, the foreign one, because a lot of their friends are the ones who own properties abroad. The VAs also was not very successful because, like I predicted then, that look, we were not due for such things to say, okay, we're going to pat you in the back and just give us something and let us forget. No, we need to get to a point of enforcement first. You have to enforce and let people know that this is what is due. The only problem what we would have is that, when government people try to protect their friends or their political associates and so on, everything falls. And as much as government is getting access into people's accounts right now, the people are also getting unprecedented information on government and people around government. And the moment you don't live by example, everything collapses, and that's what is on now. So, however, again, the government must also calibrate its action, so that you're not, it doesn't seem like the sky is falling on the average common man when you're asking them to all of a sudden pay this, pay that, without them seeing anything in return for it. And then also they're looking at you and what they're seeing is, oh, this guy seems to be enjoying, their skin is shining, they're wearing the best designer, this and that. You're asking Nigerians, for example, not to import things from abroad, but when you look at government, everything is imported. Even, I mean, people are even having to say, oh, why aren't you even buying cars from Innocent or from Pojo? What's wrong with that? What's wrong? A serving House of Rep member said a couple of weeks back, or months back, that it can't be caught dead in a Pojo 508 because he doesn't like the car. It's rubbish. He drives around in a Land Cruiser. And we don't produce anything. Even the Pojo and the Innocent we're talking about, most of it is assembling. We can't start anything from the scratch and get it going in this country. So we seem not to know our history, where we're coming from, why we're where we are today, and where we need to be going to as a people. And that's unfortunate. But all of these things are there. For example, even under Okonjo-Iweala, they talked about luxury taxes, which never actually never started at all. taxes on champagne and all of that stuff never started at all. So you can see that the government is also a captive to political bigwigs, to financial bigwigs and what have you.
And some people simply cap that as trust deficits. The reason we cannot have a tax-based budget is because there's that deficit of trust between the government and the people. Let me also bring your attention to the debate over the 2020 budget on currently ongoing, the defense of the budget. As usual, that defense has not been without some controversies, some revelation. And I wonder what you have to say when you hear the Minister of Mines and Steel say that some governors are in collusion with illegal foreign miners. And this is coming barely days after a budget said only 3 states in Nigeria can cater for their recurrent expenditure without going to the federal government.
It's unfortunate. One of the issues I've had with that budget, listen, when a budget should ordinarily be done, first of all, you populate your revenue angle of things. Where are we going to get money from? The only overriding assumption in our budget since time immemorial up till tomorrow is crude oil. So the first thing you see in the budget is crude oil. Production per day, 2-point-something million. Benchmark price, $50-something. Then that's the money. So where is it? I heard also that for solid minerals, as for last year, not one naira accrued to the government from solid minerals. That's why I read also in part of the news on the defense. So perhaps that is because, and again, people should go and also jack Fayemi as well. What did he do as the substantive solid mineral minister before he went and became, when Buhari came in 2015, that was one of the ideas that, oh, okay, Fayemi is going to solid minerals, is going to be doing so well there and all that stuff. He's an intellectual and everybody trusted. Now, if we're now hearing that 2-3 years down the line, Nigeria is not getting 1 naira from solid minerals and governors are now collaborating, okay, with illegal miners. If you look at Nigeria-China trade, 2012, there was a spike. 2012, there was a spike, which was actually driven by solid minerals. Since then, there's been a downturn. And that 2012 was under Jonathan. Again, of course, my own thinking is, okay, all those stuff, like one of the biggest problems we have is Nigerians thinking, oh, God has blessed us. He has put all of these things in the ground for us to enjoy and all of that. And, of course, we are celebrating crude oil being found in Bauchi Basin and all of that, Benue Basin and Bauchi State, and so on. So however, if we're not adding value, we are just wasting our time. And that's what's going on right now. So we can do a whole lot better on budgeting, on populating our revenue, and what have you.
Quickly, I'd just like to take you on this because we're talking about sundry economic issues. And I wanted to take you on the interview granted Godswill Akpabio, the Minister of Nigerian Affairs, where he talked about the corruption at the NDDC. I mean, he talked about that corruption being of biblical proportions. I mean, when you look at a region like the Niger Delta region that is begging for development, and you hear that level of mammoth corruption in the NDDC, what's your reaction?
Look, I mean, I personally, I must tell you, I've kind of resigned to fate that this is what we are. This is who we are in this country. In fact, some of us are endangered species because we're out of the loop. All right? With corruption, where do we begin to complain about corruption? The same NDDC, I remember a point in time when they owed so much, they still owe so much to contractors, and the little allocation they gave them, they used it to buy cars worth 90 million naira each for their commissioners and directors. I mean, come. So the world is watching this country. The world is watching us, and we're behaving as people who cannot manage this space. All right? The real danger is that the world is moving on. And this country is so vulnerable right now. Anything can happen. If it does happen, everybody will be helter-skelter. There are little things that you don't have to have a PhD to understand the need to manage your resources better than we're doing in this country. It's a joke. So, I mean, NDDC is there, doing their own thing. They've always been like that. The stories we are hearing about, in fact, someone said they should scrap them and go back to Umpadek. I said, how well were the Umpadek doing in the first place? All right? But now we're celebrating discovering crude oil in Bauchi State and all that. My thinking is, look, we're just compounding our problem. All right? Because the way we've been managing that resource especially is just a scenario where we want to sit down somewhere, we get a lot of how many billions have come in, we share it among ourselves and compound our problem, and then we go borrowing money for developmental purposes. You hear about some of the things we borrow money for education, for small roads and all of that, things that cannot generate liquidity to repay themselves. The world is watching, and our children unborn will not forgive us for the way we're managing this economy today. That's what I know. That's what I can tell you, man.
Okay, Mr. Fasua, let's talk about the ease of doing business. However dim it might look, our current economic status might look, we have actually moved up 11 places on the list of countries with the ease of doing business. However, my fear is that that list came out before a lot of these taxations were enforced or implemented, so to speak. Now, a few weeks ago, we had the Economic Advisory Council inaugurated. The president, we called them in and they had a conversation, but it's been quiet from them. What do you think they should be doing at this point to make sure that we focus the current state of the Nigerian economy for good?
Well, I believe the EAC, the PEAC, as they are called, should focus on whatever they can do to improve productivity among Nigerian people. I believe they should perhaps focus more on what government themselves can do to enable the private sector, but also to get more responsible. I have always said, as an economist, that if we focus on what they call public good in economics in this country, things like education, security, even transportation, health sector, and so on, there's a lot of jobs to be, and environment especially, there's a lot of jobs to be generated in those places. Instead of, we have to get away from this idea of everybody must be an entrepreneur. We've seen a few young people recently who were supposedly famous entrepreneurs have been busted and turned out to be fake people because we created this get rich or die trying society, and which is not good enough, So those guys, those big men that are there, professors and so on, they can focus on how to drive fiscal policy better. The ease of doing business. I also advocated that, look, we should have our own index. Unfortunately for us, if the World Bank or the IMF is not saying do it this way, we don't seem to do anything. We can have our own index and say, okay, why are people not getting business? Okay. One of the key issues which may not have been captured even in that ease of doing business is like simple issue of corruption, nepotism, and who gets what, So those are things you should think about.
Okay, Tope, I'd like to say a very big thank you to you. It's always a joy having you, come to expound on most of these economic issues. Thank you so much. We see the passion.